Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of golden era.
Hello and welcome to Living on the Edge. Over time, environmental consciousness has become more than just an expression. Today, eco-labels determine both political as well as trade policy. Eco-bans are ruthlessly imposed, trade barriers created, and the environment has become a political weapon in the exchange between nations. One such example is the ban introduced by the Environment Ministry on certain colorants in cloth called Azo Dyes. Shikha Gandhi examines the impact of the ban on the textile industry and on developing countries like India.
Their versatile exotic come in a range of colors and designs and are eminently affordable. Indian fabrics and garments have taken the world by storm, and the garment industry has emerged as one of the biggest foreign exchange earners. But India's garment exports that were growing by leaps and bounds have now come up against a formidable hurdle. The ban of Azo Dyes that the Environment Ministry is in the process of implementing may well render our exports less competitive in the international market. But what exactly are Azo Dyes and why have they suddenly become controversial? Azo Dyes are the largest group of colorants in the textile industry. They are produced synthetically in the laboratories and consist of two parts. The first is a base and the second is a substance which gives the dye its color. Of late, German health organizations and the International Agency for Research on Cancer have begun claiming that 20 or more bases or amines from which the dyes are made can cause cancer in a person wearing clothes made using Azo Dyes. And because most of India's textile exports use these dyes, they are in the process of being banned.
This cotton yarn has been colored using an Azo dye. Those who say these colors are dangerous argue that they are absorbed into the body through the skin, where enzymes act on them, releasing substances called amines. If even one of the amines happens to be carcinogenic, as some of them are, then I can get cancer. But the link between cancer and Azo dyes is still very tenuous, and nothing has been proved conclusively.
Professor Gul Rajani of IIT feels that Western research is far from conclusive. Most of the experiments have been done on animals and prove just one thing, that the 20 targeted amines from which Azo dyes are made are possible carcinogens.
You see, all the evidence which has come is from manufacturer point of view, or the studies are by actually feeding the amines. We have an association which is known as ETAD, Ecological and Toxicological Association of Dye Manufacturers. They have found that the amount of dye entering into the skin is so small that it's not sufficient to cause the cancer.
The Germans say Azo dyes are harmful. The Indians say this has not been established. But the Environment Ministry is taking no chances and plans to implement the ban. Most manufacturers will have to shift to alternatives that will push up the price of their products. And this brings us to another question. How far are the so-called developed countries using subtle protectionist measures to keep out cheaper and popular products from the third world? Remember the controversy over rayon skirts in the United States, which were declared a fire hazard overnight. The skirts were being exported as a handicraft product outside the regular quota. Interestingly, skirts made from the same material but within the quota were not seen as a fire hazard.
There are two similarities between the German action and the US action. The similarity is that both are technically correct, but both, I believe, were introduced with the intention of containing or restricting imports.
German strictures as far as Azo dyes are concerned are being most strongly pursued by their own textile and apparel industry. Over 85% of the clothes sold in Germany are imported, with a huge quantity coming from developing countries. So it's easy to see how domestic manufacturers in Germany will profit if cheaper products are kept out. The timing of the controversy is also suspect. For 25 years, the textile trade had been governed by what was called a multi-fiber arrangement. This arrangement came to an end in 1994. From 1995, all trade in textile products came under the World Trade Organization guidelines. This means that 10 years from now, all bilateral trading quotas will be abolished and international competitiveness will determine commercial success. As a result, cheaper textiles from countries like India may actually swamp the Western markets. That they are already extremely popular is apparent worldwide.
Now the WTO agreement, the ATC, provides that in 10 years all quotas will be phased out. So from 2005, this instrument of quantitative restraint is not available to them. So they are trying to invent alternatives to that.
Perhaps that's why countries like Germany are raising the environmental bogey to raise trade barriers. There's an eco-label that all textiles being exported to Germany need to have. This implies an eco-friendly production process and a host of other qualifying criteria. How many third world countries can meet these exacting standards is the moot point. The only thing that goes in Germany's favor is that the ban is non-discriminatory, unlike the US actions which have targeted specific countries. Germany, to its credit, has applied the ban to all products, whether imported or produced within the country. That's why India has been unable to raise the issue at GATT meetings. As of now, 116 dyes, including 96 Azo dyes, have been banned, and the Textile Ministry has set up a committee to look into all facets of the ban and disseminate information to the weavers.
This education or dissemination of information also includes what are the alternatives available. And we are trying to tell them that these are the dyes which should not be used as regulated by the importing country. The other dyes which can be used without any problem.
Textile research organizations are also coming up with shade cards in which banned dyes are replaced with alternative dyes of synthetic as well as vegetable origin. All major textile centers now have these cards, and weavers are now being trained in the use of non-banned dyes.
We have worked out a budget of almost 140 crore rupees for a period of 3 years, which will be invested total by the government and by the industry for starting these new laboratories and by upgrading the facility with regard to eco-friendly Azo dyes in the existing laboratories.
The only problem is that the impending ban will be tough to implement. The textile sector is dispersed all over the country, and individual houses are usually the primary production centers. Besides, experts have not yet agreed on how testing for so-called carcinogenic amines will take place.
There is a certain kind of a debate going on, because when you test it, you reduce the dye chemically to generate the amine, and then you find out whether the amine is present or not through chromatography, different kind of chromatographic systems. In the body, the dye is not reduced chemically. It is reduced by enzymatic mechanism, and you may find that amine is present. To start with, it may not be there at all.
But this doesn't seem to be a concern to the developed world. As time passes, eco-bans will become the order of the day, and developing countries will have to set their houses in order as per the guidelines set by the so-called developed world if access to international markets is a goal. Eco-friendly production may soon become an additional requirement for foreign markets. You can be sure that none of our citizens will complain if commercial pressures induce a cleaner living environment. But on the other hand, the cost of our textiles will go up exponentially, and the quantum of our exports may come down as protectionism of a new sort gets underway.
By the time you finish seeing this program, 45 persons would have died due to tobacco-related diseases. I wonder, why must we smoke, hurt ourselves and hurt the health of others? Avoid smoking and tobacco chewing. Live a healthy lifestyle.
Still to come, a report on the distillery disaster in Simbhaoli, and a look into the lost childhood of street children. But first, an update.
Episode 33, May 1995, Gir Lions. Living on the Edge takes a close look at the successful conservation of the Asiatic lions in Gujarat's Gir Sanctuary. It notes that since all lions live in the same area, they could indeed be in danger of being wiped out if disease were to strike this area. Moreover, successful conservation has resulted in too many lions and not enough forest area. Hence, a plan to relocate some lions to a new sanctuary. July 15, 1996. Kuno Palpur Sanctuary in Morena district of Madhya Pradesh is to be the second home of the Asiatic lion. The area of the proposed national park is being extended from 355 square kilometers to 4,000 square kilometers, making it one of the biggest lion sanctuaries in the world. However, discontent is rife amongst the over 5,000 tribal families who will be displaced as a result. The government has promised that each displaced family is to get 2 hectares of farmland with irrigation facilities. Verdict: unlike Saurashtra, which faces drought, Kuno has a perennial supply of water, so it might be a safe haven for lions. But translocation needs to be carried out with great care. An earlier attempt to translocate lions resulted in their death. Moreover, rehabilitation of displaced people should ensure that villages are not impoverished in this process.
Manjushri in Mysore points out that the Supreme Court has ordered some of the polluting industries in a state to shut down or install pollution control devices, but that nothing has come out of it. Unfortunately, there are several such examples from across the country. Recently, the press highlighted the sad story of the maiming of people in Simbhaoli by industrial processes. Allegations were made that this was caused by the release of hot ash by a sugar factory in the area. Romel Shamugam decided to investigate the validity of the allegations and file this report.
It was a morning like any other. 12-year-old Nizamuddin was walking along the canal heading towards his basti when his foot sank deep into hot ash. On that day, he lost all his toes, and ever since he's been barely able to walk. That was a year ago. On June 30th, 1996, this story broke in the national press. People were rudely awakened by shocking pictures and traumatic stories of maimed victims. Gulzar, Dharamjit, Ali Sher and many others had similar stories to tell. They had all been injured and crippled, they said, because of the indiscriminate dumping of hot ash, and they all blamed the sugar factory in Simbhaoli. Simbhaoli Sugar Mills is located in Ghaziabad district of eastern Uttar Pradesh. Every day, the company crushes 55,000 quintals of sugarcane grown by farmers in the area to produce 5,000 quintals of sugar. The crushed remnants of the kale called bagasse is burnt as fuel, and it produces over 2 tons of ash every day. And it's in the disposal of this ash, it would seem, that the problem lies. Locals claim that in the 63 years of the company's existence, the ash is spread over large areas in and around Simbhaoli.
मैं नहर की पटरी पर जा रहा था, तो जो है जैसे सुबह को जाते हैं घूमने के लिए, तो लैट्रिन करने के लिए गया तो वहाँ गर्म राख पड़ी हुई।
ऊपर से तो ऐसी लग रही है ठंडी हो, और नीचे से बिल्कुल ढक रही।
इसमें राख गिरी इसकी मिल की, बाबा क्या माने नुमल्ली साहब, वो छह जो है भीतर जम गई, जख्म हो गया इसमें।
डॉक्टर ने भी कहते हैं तुम्हारे पास पैसा नहीं तो क्या दिखाओगे।
फैक्ट्री वालों के पास गया, उन्होंने बोला हम यहाँ कहाँ तुम्हारे बाप के नौकर हैं।
No, this is wrong. People are just trying to make up the false cases against us because we all stay in this colony. I've got about 2,000 people staying in my colony and I haven't got a single case.
Living on the Edge visited the area a day after the story broke in the press. To our surprise, we found the company was still brazenly dumping ash in an open area behind the factory.
मील से आ जाए, कभी तो वहाँ गर्म रह जाए, आंधी चलाए उड़े, जनता की आंखों में भरा।
This, as we saw, was no exaggeration. Yet, despite the uproar about people being maimed, we found rag pickers rummaging through the ash, looking for wire and metal, and for anything that sells.
हाथ भी जल जाता है उसमें जो गरम राख आती है।
गरम राख कब आती है यहाँ?
अब भी पड़ी है उधर गरम राख तो।
अब कहाँ गरम राख? इतना बड़ा ट्रीटमेंट प्लांट लगाए हैं और लोग जो है खामोखा अपनी पॉलिटिक्स सीधी करने के लिए सिर्फ जो है इस तरह की बातें बना रहे हैं।
Not surprisingly, company officials were quick to arrive and rebuff any suggestion that the ash was harmful.
No, it is not. I'm repeatedly suggesting to you that you are seeing yourself the waste dumped here today and a few days earlier. Why don't you just touch it and see it yourself?
On the surface, this ash is cold, but once you start digging, it gets warmer. This ash is distinctly warm. It's not exactly like burning embers, however, since it rained 2 days ago.
The ash which leaves our factory is so saturated with water, there's no question of any hot ash going outside.
4 लोगों के पैर जल गए थे, 1 आदमी जल के मर गया था।
I will deny it because this is not in our knowledge. We haven't got any complaints.
The allegations and counterclaims continue. Since the most serious maiming incidents occurred over a year ago, it's going to be difficult to ascertain the truth or falsehood of the respective claims. But these incidents highlighted a more chronic problem that is by no means confined to Simbhaoli, and that is the indiscriminate dumping of hazardous waste. The Simbhaoli sugar mill has a sister distillery which produces 35,000 litres of liquor every day. For each litre of liquor produced, 12 times as much wastewater is generated. Every day, over 400,000 litres of effluent is pumped out and stored in 2 large lagoons. Though the company has set up treatment plants, this is what the locals have to say about it.
वो जो इन्होंने प्लांट जिसको ये बताते हैं करीब लगाया है अभी इन्होंने 1 साल ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा 6 महीने से काम करना शुरू करा और वो बराए नाम है, उसका कोई फ़ायदा नहीं है.
Does your company have clearance from the Pollution Control Board for discharging effluents outside its boundaries?
No. On distillery we don't have. As a matter of fact, no distillery in UP has consent of the Pollution Control Board for discharge of water effluent.
The truth is that the distillery does not even have the board's consent to run the plant. Moreover, a recent test by the Pollution Control Board showed that the BOD level of the effluent was nearly 600 grams per litre, which is 20 times greater than the permissible level. Some time ago, this toxic effluent overflowed from the lagoon into a neighbouring sugarcane field, destroying the crop.
सन 95 में हमारी मटर थी इसी बरबर वाले खेत में, उसमें तालाब टूट के पानी भर गया था, उन्होंने 40,000 का ये बना कर दिया था, 60,000 का करीब नुकसान हुआ.
Living on the edge also noticed that the effluent which is supposed to be carried by this structure over the irrigation canal is in fact being led directly into the canal, thus contaminating irrigation water. We were told that the breach had hastily been repaired a few days before we visited the area. What we found in Buxar village a kilometre away was even more alarming.
The effluent from the plant has contaminated the groundwater in this area. This water is used by the villagers for drinking. As you can see, it's yellowish in color. It has a pungent taste to it and is totally unfit for drinking.
यो परेशानी ना तो ढोर पीते ना आदमी पीते अब भैया लावे भर से भर के जब पानी पीवे.
No. The only pollution you might say is the color of the water.
The allegations that the maimings were caused by the industry's callousness led the Ministry of Environment to order the unit's immediate closure. The investigation is now being handled by the CID. In the lull that followed the initial revelations in the press, the distillery got back to business. It has somehow got permission to bottle spirit, though it may not manufacture it. And that leaves Simbhaoli where we began, engulfed in a heap of ash, its groundwater polluted, and Gulzar as confused as ever.
They say to be a child is to be free and devoid of all worries. But this has very little meaning for billions of children in our country who have their childhood snatched away from them. Oisika Chakraborty reports.
I love chocolates. That's one thing I can survive on. Even that I've grown up now, I always ask her to buy me a chocolate or a lollipop even.
Parents to me mean people you can come back and talk to, somebody to support you. Like, if suppose you're doing something and you say, it's not right, somebody to guide you, of course to give you shelter.
Home is basically fun. Well, you can always turn back and come to your house if you're anywhere you go wrong in life.
But there is another world, a world where life is totally different. Where to live, you have to first learn to survive.
हमारे नसीब में नहीं है।
कभी हाथ तोड़ देते, कभी पैर तोड़ देते।
इतने सेठ आदमी हैं, हम गरीब आदमी हैं।
Being a child here means running away from home and coming to the city in search of work. Work is something you do from early morning to late at night. You fight with other children to make sure your money is not stolen from you, push away people who want to touch you and feel you, and spend nights in the police lockup as a part of your daily routine.
मेरे बाप ने दोनों हाथ तोड़ दिए, मुझे भी मारता था तार से, इसलिए मैं भी भाग के आ गया।
मेरे को खेत पे काम करवाते थे, इसलिए मैं वो खेत पे काम नहीं करता था, इसलिए मारते थे, भाग के आ गया।
For boys like Gopal, home is the railway platform or a nearby slum. It's not as if all these children live alone. Some of them work to support their parents, who are only interested in the money that's earned at the end of the day.
दिन भर ही चुनता, फिर पानी भर के ले जाकर बोतल बेच देता हूँ। सताते हैं ना, वहाँ भी बोतल चुन के बेचते हैं। रोटी बनाना, सब्जी बनाना, यही काम करते हैं।
Of course, there are also fun times when you go to Lal Killa and watch video films for 4 rupees, or take smack and gamble with the other boys. But more often than not, your belongings get stolen, or you get beaten up by some older boy for not depositing the hafta.
बड़े लड़के बोलते खाना पाना लेके आ जाओ, अब लेके आना ही पड़ेगा, नहीं तो वो बहुत मारते हैं हमको, और जब हम थोड़ी सी पुराना हो जाते हैं तो हम उनकी स्टाइल मारते हैं।
If by chance you've managed to buy a new shirt or scarf, the police will put you into the lockup saying that only a pickpocketeer can afford new clothes. And if it's not the police harassing you, it's some other man trying to push himself on you.
पुलिस वाले मारते थे और वो जो हफ्ता देते हैं ना, वो मांगते थे, लेकिन इतने पैसे आते नहीं थे हफ्ते के, 200-300 रुपए मांगते थे, तो हम वहाँ से भाग के दिल्ली आ गए।
मेरा बाप मेरे दीदी को गाली दे रहा था, मैं अपनी बेटिया से शादी करूँगा तो ये करूँगा तो वो करूँगा।
Despite the odds, there are people who are trying to improve the conditions of these children. Ashray and Salam Balak Trust are two of the many organizations where people have come together to work with the children. First, the basic things, food, clothing and shelter, are taken care of. The next step is non-formal education, recreational activities and vocational training. The striking thing is that nobody is forced to join these programs.
Ashray, as you know, is a kind of shelter for shelterless. Most of these children are working in railway station or as shoe polishers, hawkers, vendors, rag pickers. Our aim is to give them some alternative education with the help of which they can stand on their feet, they can better their lot themselves. It's really difficult to bring them to the class, but once they come to the class, then they start realizing slowly and slowly that this education will help them in doing even the same work which they are doing at platforms.
Music, theatre, clay modelling and painting are also encouraged so that these children can at least have a bit of their childhood back.
शुरू में आना भी नहीं पसंद करते कि हमारा काम करने का समय हम नहीं आएंगे, लेकिन जब उनको लगता है कि काम से ज़्यादा अच्छी चीज़ हमें यहाँ मिल रही है तो फिर वो आने लग जाते हैं। 5-6 साल लड़की का रेप केस आया हुआ है, हम लोग से यही होप करते हैं कि हम उनको उनके पाँव पे खड़ा करें, लेकिन स्टेशन से बाहर।
There is hope, for some of these children have managed to actually build a new life for themselves. They study in full-time schools or work in proper offices and look back upon their runaway working days as something that is now behind them. In fact, you might even have seen this face when you went to the cinema hall last week.
कैसे लगा बैंडेड क्वीन में काम करना?
मुझे तो बहुत अच्छा लगा, वो मेरा पहला कैमरा था, मीडिया से भी नहीं था, सिनेमा से ही सीधा वो पहला कैमरा था, तो मुझे हिचक भी थी और उनके साथ काम करके बहुत ही अच्छा लगा, शेखर कपूर के साथ।
Anand and Gautam both work in a television company, and one thing they're sure of is
ना इस कंपनी से कोई चोरी करने का दिल करते,
न छोड़ने का दिल करते, मेरे को फिर नौकरी करने का दिल करते इसी कंपनी में।
Anand, Gautam, Kapil, Harish are just a handful of boys who have managed to make a life for themselves. For each of them, there are a million others to whom life has not been so kind. Physically and mentally abused, doing who knows what to survive, they're a resilient breed, tougher and stronger in many ways than the average adult. But they have all paid a price. They've grown up many years before their time.
I can't make out the name or the address, but this letter tells us about someone's love for animals and the wish to do something about the cruelty that is meted out to them. We leave you this week with a report on how one person sought to make a difference.
If your idea of a disco is a wild place with loud throbbing music and scantily attired people, you'd be surprised to know what one of Haryana's most popular discos was recently used for. I found it doubling by day as a venue for a somewhat unique exhibition, for which renowned designer Ritu Berry has come up with a whole range of t-shirts, caps, mugs and other utility items, the sale proceeds of which will go to a voluntary organization that works for sick and deserted animals.
It's not so much a money-making exercise as the fact that we want young people to be walking around with a People for Animals message.
The hand puppets were the hottest property. Not only the kids, but even the adults fell for them.
This is Chunmun the Chuha. This is Shishi the panda because he comes from China. This is Nanhi the duckling, Butler the penguin and Sultan the sher.
One reason why the exhibition's unique is because it's the first time that a designer who's grown rich on fashion has gone out of the way to create a line without expecting anything in return.
I was doing something that I wanted to, and it was just a flow of ideas and concepts that worked out, and they're not heavy-duty designing actually needed for things like this. This is basically to get a message across.
Ritu Berry's initiative is laudable, but I couldn't help being cynical about celebrities latching onto green causes for sheer publicity. It's the new in thing after all.
I think if a celebrity or a recognized person does something, it's always noticed, and it creates a kind of fervor that most people start believing in.
What we made in the Delhi sale will go into the Bhavana Gaushala, and the money that is made from the Gurgaon sale will go into constructing a shelter in Gurgaon.
The choice is yours. If you're convinced by the argument, you can put your money where your heart is and splurge. After all, it's for a good cause.